Alright gang, welcome back to Tin Man Customs. And sorry the videos have been a little slow this time between them, but I kind of ran into a little bit of a creative block on what I wanted to do next. So I went through my bin of possible mod fodder figures and actually made some decisions on them and bagged things up and got some characters all assigned to each of them, so I should be back to moving on a little faster with everything. But this video, I was going to work with Shuffler, who's one of the Titan Masters that came out that doesn't have a body for his head mode, but he's great. He's got a little elephant robot partner here that also turns into a tank and a missile launcher, and this guy can either ride on the vehicle or he can fit in there in his head mode, so he's part of the elephant. But I wanted to have a body made up for this guy, and I kind of like that he's a little bulky elephant, like he'd be really like a tough little character. So I think I'm going to use this guy from the Energon series. This is Strongarm, and I already went through and removed the head and kind of made a fitting for this guy's head mode, just to test it and make sure that that actually worked before moving on with it. So I kind of like that he's a shorter, stockier bot, and he can actually use the weapon mode of this as a big missile launcher, which is kind of cool. So he's kind of a rough and tough sort of character. The character of Shuffler was actually one of the, in Japan he was released there during their Headmasters series, wasn't ever released in the US, and oddly enough he was released as a little guy that turned into the head and didn't have a body, because the idea was he could use any of the other Headmaster robot bodies. So I've not watched the Japanese cartoon, so I'm not really sure if that came into play during the cartoon series or not, but I kind of like this mod, so that's what I'm going to work on. But I want to mix, I believe, some of the colors from this variant in, but I like the black, the darker blue from this version, so I think I'm going to dismantle them, kind of swap some parts around, and that'll just leave some, maybe some touch-up paint details, so it should be a fairly quick mod. But I decided I was going to do this because a few people had asked if I could show kind of how I dismantle things, just using what I use to take out pins and that sort of thing. Pins are still, you know, they're from figure to figure can be a problem, or some of them pop out really easily. So I can show kind of how I dismantle them. So we will go ahead and get started doing that. But like I said, I think I want to do some of these darker colors with this light blue, and then maybe paint in some purples into the light blue to match his head. And I don't care for this. On the Energon figures, he had a big axe or a bazooka that would mount there. I don't think I'm going to use that. We'll see after I get him all put together if I want to have him wielding an axe, since he's got this big missile launcher. Also not going to use the little Energon star, so we'll get that off of him. Let's see here. When he's in vehicle mode, I would really like to be able to have the Headmaster, or Titan Master, sorry, be able to sit in here and drive it. I mean, you can kind of cram him in there, but he looks kind of awkward. I think I might be able to carve out some of the plastic here that's on the back side of his crotch piece. I think I can carve into that a little and make a space for the figure to be able to sit down in there a little lower. So we'll figure that out when I get to that point. I will probably end up using a Dremel to shave some of that out of there. So let's go ahead and start taking this guy apart. And what are we going to start with? This guy is put together screws. So I keep a little screwdriver set that has all sorts of different size heads. I think that's about the only size we're going to need here. For removing the pins, I typically make sure I've got a punch that's going to be the right size, but I also use this one, which is a spring-loaded hammer punch, I believe. As you press in the tip, there's a spring inside here that as you compress it, the spring will set a hammer off and it'll pop back out. This one works really well to pound some of the pins out, but I haven't found a bunch of different size tips in these. So anytime I use this, I do end up, I may end up damaging the plastic around where the pin goes in just a little bit. It mainly just kind of pushes the plastic out a little bit. Depending where the pin is, it doesn't really matter. Like this one wouldn't, I don't think the damage would show in any of the modes, so I would probably be fine with using that. Now, that works for regular pins. These, however, are some of the larger flat pin, which has always been a problem for me to get them out of there. I recently saw a method of removal where you can use a soldering iron. Don't use it if you've not used one before, and if you're a kid, definitely don't use it. Make sure your parents are helping you with that, because you'll really mess things up and hurt yourself and start a fire. So let's not do that. But the method that I had seen was taking the tip of the soldering iron, and this one's not plugged in. Don't plug it in until you're ready to use it, just so you know. But you will heat up the pin. I believe they had heated it up maybe 30 seconds, maybe a little longer. Heat the pin up so it warms the plastic that the pin is through. And this is let me make sure I got the name right, Neodymium Magnet. Found this on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below. But it's either it's got a 50-pound pull or a 150-pound pull. I'll have to look up in the description of the one that I bought. But after you heat the pin up, slap the magnet on there, and it should pull the pin out of the plastic. And once you pull it out, don't touch the pin, because it will be very hot. So let that cool off. As you can see, has a good amount of pull to it. So that's a neat thing. I think this was only like $9 on Amazon. So again, I'll put the link down below, and we'll We'll see that in play here as I go to take that apart. It looks like these pins go all the way through the tire down to there. And I also want to remove this, which is another one of those kind of pins. So we'll see if I'm able to get in there with the magnet or not. Looks like I might be able to get in there and pull that out. Alright. Make sure you don't get that magnet near your phone or camera or anything. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get started taking this guy apart. Oh, before I forget, tape and a pin. As I remove the screws and the pins, I like to tape them up and write down where the screws came from. Because that way, when I get back around to reassembling them, I will know where they go. Alright guys, I think my phone is having some issues here. I think we've lost part of my video. I stopped recording, I'm not sure why. So I'm going to do a bit of a recap here. I had some issues taking this figure apart. I was hoping to use the black wheels off of this guy to replace these blue wheels. Had some issues with this pin not wanting to come out, so I took the front of the wheels off to see what was going on inside, and this pin goes through several little noodly bits, and it was not coming out, so ended up changing what I was going to do, because you know, you can make the plan, start working on the plan, things are going to go sideways, so you just throw the plan out and switch to something else. So I'm going to forego having the black tires on my final piece, but with removing the cover off of the wheel, it allowed me to get to the screw to be able to take this chest plate off. So I will be able to swap that chest plate out with this darker one, assuming I can get these wheel covers off without damaging the figure. So we will move ahead with that. I will say, many times when I get into working on these figures, they don't always come apart the same, they don't go back together the same, even if it's the same mold. I've noticed, like the animated Springer figure that I have up on my channel, I've made 4 different versions of that figure, as I did some commissions for some people. Every time I took one of those figures apart, it was a different issue, a different problem. Something came apart differently, something didn't come apart. So I find that very interesting when working with this stuff. You think you know how the figure's going to come apart, and then something goes sideways. So let me just see. I couldn't reach that screw without having to take the tire pieces off. So if you don't have to take something apart, that's even, then don't try taking it apart. And I will say, just because something comes apart doesn't mean it's going to go back together just as easily. So that's something to watch out for too. Those came apart great. Much easier than the other version came off. And I didn't have to ruin those covers. So, really pleased with that. Now, when you're putting a screw in that goes on the joint, feel how tight that is when you first put the screw in. That's really tight. You don't want it to be that tight. Just give it a little quarter turn and it'll help loosen it up to however tight you want that joint to be. You'll usually see that on knees and elbows, sometimes shoulders. But that is the way to do that. Just another thing to keep an eye on as you're taking things apart. Just because you get something apart doesn't mean it's going to go back together real well. Don't want to have to do that again. Now, a lot of these screws are the same length and same type of screws on several different places. The reason I tend to label everything and put them back in the holes they went in is because they've already been in there. There's already the plastics chewed up for that particular screw, so in my mind, if it goes back in the same spot, the screw should go right back in and not tear the figure up anymore. So I already like that color combination. There he is. Body didn't come apart exactly as planned. Went back together decently well. So, things I need to do next. His legs always bothered me because they won't go back any further than that because of the little seats. Now, if I'm going to make this fit this little guy's, then it's going to be a one-seater Jeep, not two seats. I may trim some of that off so he has a little more mobility, which I think I would prefer, and I'll trim some of that away as well. And then I'll probably paint a few details on there just to get some of the, maybe just some other highlights of purple somewhere in him. but I think I like the way the red looks with him, and that's probably going to stay. So we'll figure out where I'm going to throw some purple on him. But I'm going to get this mess kind of cleaned up and get on to doing some paint work with him. Here we are again. Here is my body figure for Titan's Return Shuffler, and this is what I ended up with. I had mixed the two versions of Energon Strongarm together. Let me go ahead and bring out the original. Here's the original Strongarm figure. Doesn't stand up real well. He never did. The alternate version of him was the light blue with all these tan bits, and I went ahead, as you saw in the video, separated those out and put them back together. I was really hoping to show a little more how to remove pins from the figure, but ran into some issues with those pins. The proportions on this guy, I think I mentioned that previously. I like that the body is a little stockier and shorter than the other Titan's Returns. So I feel like this little elephant would make a good little short, tough guy. So that's what I was going with here. And ended up removing this connector here, which holds this axe in vehicle mode. Since I wasn't using that weapon, went ahead and removed that. Also, obviously removed the head off the other figure and had to open up the neck socket just a little bit more to accommodate the head port. But it was nice. It was not much of an alteration there. And this will show up more once I get him transformed into vehicle mode. Let's see if I can get this in focus here. I removed the tops of the seats on this version and part of the waist, the crotch piece here. Cut that out and shaved it down. Not only does it help his mobility, I mean, he's got a lot more range of motion now, which I think he does stand up better than the original figure does. The regular figure just has a lot of trouble tipping back. So I kind of have to pose him out a little more to get him to stand. I also shaved away a lot of the plastic here that made up some of the foot on the original one, which I think this gives him a lot of the issues he has when standing. But the reason I cut all of that away was when this guy is in Jeep mode, the pilot is able to sit in the Jeep. So we'll go ahead and get him transformed up here. I don't even think I'm going to have to go into a fast forward for the transformation. I'm going to be careful in here because the purple detail I painted on here is very close together. Trying to get that pegged in. The purple highlights I painted in here were trying to match the purple of that guy. Didn't come out exact, or close, but I put a clear coat on top of those to help protect that so it doesn't get scuffed off of there. Also went in and added some red highlights just to break up his color a little bit. Okay, so on the original, you can see here there's two small seats in there and there's no room for a Titan Master figure. But with the removal of the seats on this one, there's a hole all the way through. Let's get him transformed. Gotta fold the windows forward a little to get him down in there. But now, he does sit a little close to that windshield, but that's mainly due to the face on the back of the head. But, you know what? He's in there driving the vehicle, which I can appreciate. And his elephant buddy can ride back there like Grape Ape. You can also transform him into his weapon mode, and that would do a little more artillery back there on the back of this Jeep. It's a little harder to attach that on camera. I apologize for that. But those hind legs should slide down in between those two in that space there. I had that sticking in there earlier just fine. But there he is. This guy also turns into a handheld rocket launcher, which he is able to wield. And there he is. I think this guy's kind of fun. Definitely wanted, he's yet another one of those Titan Masters that I wanted a head for. Wanted a body, I should say, for, not a head. And I think this works out well. And the color scheme's not your traditional Autobot color scheme, but it matches the colors on the actual Titan Master figure that came out. And that's pretty much it on him. I will continue working on some of the other Titan Master figures I have that need bodies. Give me a thumbs up if you like what you see. Comments or suggestions. Maybe there's a different body out there that will work better with Shuffler, in your opinion. And if you really like what you see, go ahead and hit subscribe, because I will continue making more of these videos. Thanks a lot.